Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. We're privileged to have Giuliano Grazioli, now will be known as Graz from now on. Thank you for him for giving him us his time this evening. Just a few things on the pre-season friendlies. I expect everybody's seen the ones that have been advertised. So all these are away. The 5th of July is Supermarine. 8th is Melksham, 11th is Corsham, 18th we've got 2 games, one at lunchtime, which is Bristol City, but that's behind closed doors. I believe it's at the training ground because their pitch is being redone. And then in the evening we're at Hereford. First one for Paul Caddis against us. So they're the pre-season friendlies to look forward to. So let's bring Vic on.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hi, Vic.
Yeah, good.
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good.
I'm very well, thank you.
We should say thank you very much indeed to the Fools Rush In last weekend.
Yes.
We were on Friday, so we were made very welcome. I think we both had a good time on it, didn't we? So that
was
very
great,
nice
great fun. Yeah. And so don't forget, they're on after us at 9 o'clock tonight as well. So you've got time for your cups of teas and get settled and back into that. So, right. So let's bring Graz on. Good evening.
Good evening, Chris and Vic. How are you both?
We're very well, thank you, Brad. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Yes, thank you. Right, so if there's any questions, please leave them in the comments. As I say every week, we'll get through as many as we can. And I will be sending them through to Graz anyway as well. So just leave them in the comments if you've got anything that you want to say to him. We will send them as well. So I will leave you to it and I will speak to you.
Speak to you later, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. And I was saying to you earlier that, you know, when we sort of said you were coming on this week, the comments were all favourable. There was none of this, no, not him. There were lots of good comments, which goes to prove that even though you were at Swindon for a very short space of time and you scored that goal for Stevenage, your relationship with the town fans has always been good, hasn't it?
We mentioned that earlier. You know, it wasn't a club where I actually set the world alight in terms of performances or goals. However, like you said, the rapport with the fans was always good. You know, whether it was at the ground or, you know, a night out in the town, it was always pleasurable. So you say there was always lots of good comments. That's probably the in-laws that have joined the left questions.
Well, Malcolm Davis has already sent in this in Grazioli, oh la 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 la. You remember that song? You must remember that. So,
oh yes.
Yes. I won't sing anymore because it's not really for this time of the night. But in terms of why do you think that relationship was? Because I said to you, it's because you all seem to play with a smile on your face. You seem to be enjoying your football, even though it wasn't a great time for the club. So why do you think that was a rapport that you had?
I really don't know. You know, obviously the other clubs where I've scored goals, I can understand that. But like I said at Swindon, whether it's, you know, I went through a bit of adversity with the injuries that I had and, you know, scored some goals in the championship. I really don't know. It's probably ones for the fans to answer. I don't really know the answer because I don't think I performed at any sort of real good level that I should have. Maybe that first year in the championship when I played the last few games of the season. But other than that, I don't think I reached sort of any sort of real potential at the club. But like I said, I worked hard. I always wanted to play. I never asked to leave, even when I wasn't playing. I enjoyed my time. Really good time at Swindon.
Well, Emma Frost says, evening, Graz. Hope you're well. So the message is already coming in. Let's go back to the start then. You played for a lot of clubs in terms of, you know, your playing career. You know, the likes of Wembley when you started, Peterborough, Yeovil, Town on Loan, Woking, Stevenage, of course. So how did it all start for you?
I was with a very successful Sunday side. So from the age of under 10s right through to 16s. But I was always sub. Story of my life and my career, really. I was always sub. I was late developer. Some may say I never developed. So I'd always come on and scored 2 or 3 goals. And when you come to the age of 16, a lot of my teammates, we were probably one of the best teams in London at the time. And they all went off to pro clubs to do the old school YTS. And I never got taken on by any clubs. So I went down the route of obviously non-league football, went to university. And it was during non-league days at Wembley where I'd got spotted. I'd scored 30 goals for 2 seasons at the age of 18, 19, and there was clubs sniffing. And then I was very fortunate. I was very lucky. I got the call to say Peterborough United would like you to sign for them, and I did. And that was in the June. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the FA telling me that I'm due for an FA hearing. I've breached the contract. Peterborough have breached a contract and now down for illegal approach. And I was told I wasn't allowed to play any football till October.
Goodness.
So from being a dream to becoming a professional to all of a sudden it was the biggest nightmare. But credit to Peterborough United, they stuck by me throughout. When we had the FA hearing and everything got cleared, I signed on the Tuesday, and on the Saturday, the first team manager resigned, John Steele. So that was great. I got called into the office on a Monday morning to say I'm going on loan, and I went on to Yeovil for a successful 3-month loan spell with the then manager Graham Roberts, the old Tottenham centre half.
How do you deal with that then? That sort of knockback, because for many of us, gosh, I never had the chance because I wasn't good enough. But for many of us to become a professional footballer would have been a dream, and then you have that knockback. How did you deal with that personally?
Fortunately, I've got a great family and friends base. It was a tough time. It was the fact that I couldn't go anywhere to play. I wasn't even allowed to go back to Wembley to play. It was literally no football whatsoever for a good 4 to 5 months. Like I said, my friends, family especially, were very good. And I think Peterborough United themselves were always in constant communication with me once a week, making sure I was okay, ensuring me and giving me the belief that it will happen. We're supporting you through this. They could have quite easily pulled the plug, because it would have cost them money with the legal fees, etc. But they stuck by me, and I'm forever grateful for that. Well,
messages continuing to come in. This from Marcus. Always gave 100% on the pitch, unlike many others at the club in those years. Hope you're well this evening. Did you enjoy your partnership with Mr. Invincible, which we'll talk about a little bit later on? Our Australian, of course. And Daz St. George, STFC, 78 appearances, 18 goals, 1999 to 2002. 18 goals, a couple of them really, really memorable. And one of them against a certain team, which we'll mention later too.
Yeah.
So Stevenage eventually come into your life. You go on to loan to them. Now, I've got to say, this is when you came to national prominence, but you would think you had a long-term career with Stevenage, but it wasn't that long, was it?
It was only 4 months. I just returned from 14 months out with a broken foot. And I couldn't get back into the team, the first team at Peterborough United. And a call come in from Barry Fry to say Stevenage had come in for a loan deal. It'd be good to get just a month of football. And I wasn't sure, was I'm an R in. And then they threw the carrot of, well, actually, they're playing in the FA Cup against Swindon in the Championship. It's quite a big game, a bit of a showcase. And I thought, you know what, I'll do it. And then obviously it just blew up, and it was just a manic 6 months, and it went from there, really.
Blew up is quite appropriate, bearing in mind the weather at that time.
That's right.
I mean, Steve McMahon was manager, of course, of Swindon, wasn't he, at that time? What do you remember of that game? Because Swindon scored early through Mark Walters, didn't they? And then, I don't know, the Hooley of all Hoolies seemed to blow up in the second half. And you took advantage of that. What do you remember about that game?
We worked really hard a couple of weeks leading up to the fixture. We got ourselves really fit. The manager, Paul Fairclough, at the time, really got our fitness levels up because we knew it was going to be a tough game. And I think Swindon were riding high at the time as well in the Championship. They weren't struggling. I think they were, top half at least, or even maybe in the top 4 or 5. And we went there full of confidence, but with nothing to lose. Paul got a psychologist in, and we worked on the mental side of the game. And if we get beat, we get beat. But sometimes these things happen. And I remember Mark Walter scored an absolute screamer from about 30 yards, wind assisted, which I told him when I signed after. But it was a hell of a strike. And we thought we'd be really, and we were under the cosh for a while. But we went in, I think it was 1-1 at the time. I think we got the equaliser, Jason Solomon, just before half time. And then we come out, and like you say, the weather just changed dramatically. It went from, a bit of wind to, it was nearly a false hurricane, wasn't it? I remember Fraser Digby couldn't kick the ball out of his penalty area. So when we took advantage of that, we put the pressure on, and I was fortunate with a little toe poke, and we managed to hold on right through to the end. And obviously that's when it all started. That's when it all kicked off, and all the media hype began.
Because if I remember rightly, there were 1 or 2 Stevenage fans on the Stratton Bank who actually, I think on the day, got hypothermia because it was such a horrible day.
That's right. I remember, because obviously there's no roof and they got soaked. Yeah, they did get soaked.
So that goal, I mean, you mentioned how Fraser couldn't kick the ball out of the penalty area. I watched again the footage yesterday, and literally it went about 10 yards. You got the ball and then just managed to stick it in. What's a moment like that? Because you know that is a big moment in FA Cup history in a way.
It is, and the celebration wasn't great. I couldn't, a forced knee slide. It was just mayhem. I think because of the way the weather was, we knew it was going to be difficult for Swindon to try and get back into the game, just to get into the half. But I do believe I think they had a goal disallowed right at the very end of the game. I think they had a chance that we were fortunate with. But that's the FA Cup, isn't it? We've seen it so many times. It's commonplace now, isn't it? Every year there's 2 or 3 teams that go on and do really well against the bigger sides, and we were one of the first sides to do that. What's sort of pleasing back then was a lot of the non-league sides that do well now are full-time, and it's their full-time job. Whereas, we were Stevenage, we were part-time. People were painting, decorators, architects, etc. So, we didn't have those fitness levels like some of the clubs have now in non-league. So that made it even more, even more special.
Yeah, because Stevenage, of course, repeated that FA Cup win against Swindon a few years later, 5-2 if memory serves, at Stevenage ground. I mean, you must have watched Stevenage's progress since then with great interest, because, of course, now they're one league higher than Swindon. So, their progress has been remarkable in many ways, isn't it?
To be fair, they've done really well. And it's these sort of cup runs that really helps and set the base for, ground improvements, turns a little bit of money in the budget. And then they've done really well. They've gone up and down the last few years, but they've done a really good job this year to get out of League Two and into League One. And, credit to Steve Evans, who's a manager who knows those levels really well.
Now, what about the next round? Swindon in one round, but then it's Newcastle United. That's when the hype really kicked off, wasn't it?
Yeah, we the night of the Swindon game, we were on the coach and we got a phone call from the FA to invite myself and the manager Paul Fairclough to the FA headquarters. I think it was Lancaster Gate on Sunday, to be picked up in a car for the live draw. And I believe it was John Toshak. I can't remember the other Kevin Keegan maybe. And they do like a dummy run to begin with, and we picked out Man United in a dummy run.
Right.
So we go, that's great. That's our chances gone. And then obviously Newcastle, but it was obviously Newcastle at St James's Park. So we were all delighted. We thought, this is great, at Newcastle. However, the then chairman Victor Green at Stevenage made the decision that it was Stevenage at home, but Newcastle wanted it moved to Newcastle. And as a player, we wanted to play at Newcastle, like we all wanted to. But the chairman Victor said, no, I'm not having it. We've got more of a chance being the home side in a smaller ground. Not only that, we get a bigger percentage of the fees, which was probably the bigger reason. But we put a big stand behind one of the goals, and again, we didn't win the game, but we put a great performance on, and we got a well-deserved draw and the replay up in St James's Park, which is what all the players wanted.
Yeah, I think A. Shearer might have scored the goal for Newcastle, mightn't he? But
he did. It was his first game back after a long time out of injury, and he scored within 3 or 4 minutes.
But Grazioli also scored, didn't he?
Yeah, header as well, which was quite surprising for most.
Yeah, so how was that? I mean, my goodness. Swindon, we all love Swindon, clearly, but Newcastle's a different level, isn't it? So how was that to score against them?
That was probably the biggest moment, just because it was my first sort of real game on live TV, where all your family and friends are watching. The hype surrounding the game was massive. So everybody was watching. Wherever your cousins were in Italy or wherever in America, had cousins watching. And so you felt the pressure of everyone for the first time watching you play. They've heard that you're a footballer. They've heard you're okay, but they're going to actually see you now for the first time. So you really want to perform. And I was fortunate that day that I got the equaliser and had a relatively good game.
Yeah, you did all right in the replay too, didn't you? You weren't disgraced in any way, shape or form.
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, that's one of my regrets. I didn't play in the replay. I got injured the week before against Gateshead. And I didn't pass the fitness test before the game. But again, yeah, we performed again. Shearer scored. Shearer was the difference on the day. There was a contentious goal that they'd scored that we believed didn't cross the line. But a great, fantastic moment for the town of Stevenage. And like I said, it was the basis for them to be able to grow.
Philip says, not only was Graz a quality footballer, he was a true gent and a total pleasure to look after. This is Philip Skeets. Please say hi to him.
Skeety. Yeah, great guy, Skeet, Phil. Yeah. I mean, is he well? Can he answer that? Is he keeping well now?
Well, we'll wait for that message to be received. He's sort of messaging us as we speak with a bit of luck. So how did the move to Swindon come about? Because, as I said, in Swindon's history, Stevenage remains one of the big cup shocks. So how did it all happen like that?
So I was at Peterborough United. My strike partner was Jimmy Quinn. So we done relatively well together, big man, small man, etc. 4-4-2. And I remember one game we played away. I think it might have been Hartlepool. And I got on the coach, and Jimmy pulled me just before I went to the back, and he went, "Your contract's up in the summer, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Don't sign it." I said, "What?" He said, "Don't sign it." And I thought, "Why?" And he didn't tell me. He said, "No, just don't sign your new deal. I'll be in touch." And a bit strange. And then he didn't turn up for training on the Monday. And we all asked where he was, and Barry said he's gone for an interview. And then he got named Swindon Town manager. And obviously 2 and 2 together. I was like, really? Championship? I thought, no. So I got my agent to make the phone call. He said, yeah, I want to get him in the summer. Tell him not to sign any deals. We'll take him. And that was it. So it was Jimmy really who obviously see me training every day and playing with him was obviously the main instigator of me coming to Swindon. But I must say Barry Fry was great. I got offered lots of deals to try and stay there, but the lure of Championship football was just too much.
Because Jimmy Quinn loomed large in that bonkers game I was talking to you about. Philip Skeets, by the way, says, all good, mate. So it's all right.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, because there's that bonkers game with Peterborough, 9-1 away at Barnet, against Barnet, of all teams who you are to go on to. Jimmy Quinn scored, of course. You got 5 in that. And I think Bart Grimmick was in goal, was he not?
He was.
For
That's right,
Peterborough.
he was, yeah.
So there was quite a Swindon connection in that game, wasn't there?
There was indeed, yeah. Bart and obviously Jimmy. That was the final year me and Jimmy played together. But the funny story with that is I was due to sign for Barnet 2 days before that Saturday. On the Thursday, I got called by Barry Fry to say, Barnet have come in for you. Unfortunately, we don't have many forwards for this weekend, so you'll have to play for us. And obviously the rest is history. I wasn't going to sign for Barnet after the scoring 5. I got pulled back and said that the deal's off and come and see me in my office to sign a new deal. So that was Barry Fry. One extreme to the next.
Scoring a hat-trick's all right, but 5, that's crazy, isn't it?
It's just one of those days where at the time everything I touched went in. But what was nice, all my family and friends were there because obviously I'm from North London, Barnet. And so mum and dad, my sister, granddad were all in the stands at the time. And I remember running to them in joyous celebration, and they're jumping up and think, well, they were sat in the Barnet end, which wasn't obviously a great idea. But, fortunately, a club like Barnet, then, they understood how important it was for me, local boy, coming back and doing what I'd done.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention about the Stevenage game, I mentioned to you before we started this, was I was in the town end that day, and the miracle of Grazioli scoring for Stevenage at Swindon, gentleman in a wheelchair, goal goes in, gentleman leaps out of wheelchair, back into wheelchair. So you have performed a miracle at the county.
And that's what I do. I perform miracles. That's exactly what I do.
I'll never forget that moment. It was extraordinary. So what sort of state was Swindon in when you got there? Because it was a pretty turbulent few years for the club, wasn't it?
I'd come from League 2 where I got paid on time every month without fail. I'd come to the Championship where I got paid 2 weeks late with a cheque. So you're more or less, by the time that cleared, it was 3 weeks late. And I remember, at the time I was, a little place in town, but I'm not getting paid in the Championship. I didn't really get the full extent. My agent didn't tell me really enough that was what was going on with the club. But each week there was talk of administration, club being bought, being sold. We had chairman upon chairman arriving in helicopters. We thought, oh, now we've really made it. We got a chairman that's flying in on a helicopter into the training ground, like Razor Ruddock turning up, Roy Evans as manager. But each week there's always something in the press to say, and then again, we never really got paid on time, even through those years either, for being brutally honest. There's always some delay. And you just sort of get used to it after all. But, for those who had mortgages and kids, and it was a bit of a worrying time at first when I first joined. Like I say, 3 weeks late for payment is just ridiculous.
Because this is the time of Terry Brady, isn't it? Who's Karen Brady's dad. I mean, he was going to build a new 40,000-seater stadium, I seem to remember, on the Thames front garden, which never materialised either. So, as players, how do you deal with that? Because as fans, we kind of get caught up with the hype of it. And sort of, think, oh, great, this is fabulous. We're going to have a new stadium. We're going to have a brilliant club, blah, blah, blah. I think Gary Alexander scored for a sign for something like 350,000. But
That's right, did. Yeah.
Scored on his debut, but it was disallowed, if I seem to remember. But at that time, we all thought, well, here we go as a football club. But how was it as a player?
In that change room, we had some experienced guys, the likes of Alan Reeves, when I first joined, Scott Leach, Iffy and Nora, and they've seen it and done it, for years at other clubs. They've experienced that, and they all sort of said, listen, don't get too excited with what you're reading until it happens. Don't start spending your money, more or less. But it's difficult for players. Like I said, with wife, kids, etc., mortgages to pay. You're due your wages, and like I said, 3 weeks late, and even then you weren't sure you were getting it. It was always on the last knockings. Like the PFA would come in and say, listen, if you're not paid tomorrow, you're free to go. You're a free agent because they've breached contract. But it would always turn up on that final day, so no one could actually leave. Because I think if that was the case, I think a few players would have left. And unfortunately, we got relegated that first year back into League One.
You see, the thing is, we as fans don't see all that, do we? And how does that affect a player's mindset? Because we all do. We've all done jobs. Some days we're thinking about something. Some days we're thinking about what's going on at home. All that kind of stuff. What about footballers? We expect them to go out and perform to 100% every game, don't we? But things like that must play on your mind.
Being honest, me personally, it probably affects you in the day-to-day when you're training because you've got more time to think about it. But come match day, once the whistle's blown, there should be nothing else in your mind, whether you're not being paid or how. Your adrenaline and just the game excitement should get you through. But it's when the game finishes and then you're driving back home and bills to pay. That's when it hit you more the Monday to Friday than the actual match day. But like I said, I was fortunate. I didn't have wife or kids at the time, so it didn't affect me too much. But you could really see some of the older ones who were worried, constantly in with the chairman, having conversations with the manager about it. So I'm probably not the best person to ask at the time. Some of the more experienced ones who were going through it would have been in a better place to answer. But like I said, come match day, once it's 3 o'clock, you seem to forget that and play.
Yeah. Andy Garrett, who helped us get you on here, actually. So thank you, Andy. Remember the Stevenage game well. One of the few games I went to around that time. Many of us remember it, Andy. Many of us remember it. But, it wasn't a great time on the pitch either. But I'm going to talk to you about a couple of memorable games. And I think the ones you know what I'm going to talk about. Let's talk about the Fulham game, because at that time, I think Al Fayed had just taken them over. They were the big spending London club. And it was towards the end of the season. You came on as a sub, if I remember rightly. And this was a big, big win. So how did that come about? Because Swindon were really rock bottom at that time, weren't they?
Yeah, we were. And like I said, I'd just come back from the injury and I'd come back and scored a couple of goals. And I think I nicked the defender, Andy Melville, I think it was, the centre half. I think he miscontrolled it. I nicked it. And fortunately enough, I just slid it past the keeper. I remember at the time they were, I don't know if it was Keegan or Tigana was the manager. They had the big hitters playing. And that was a 1-0 win for us. Unfortunately, I think we went away to Stockport the following weekend and got relegated. But that was, at the time, you look back, you'd like to beat the likes of Fulham. I think we went to QPR and done well. Sheffield United that year as well, we done well. We just didn't have enough at that time. I think all what was going on off the pitch as well. We lost George Endar, who was a big player for us at that time. He was a great player. And when you lose players like that, it was always going to be difficult to stay up in that league.
How did relegation affect a squad? I mean, as a professional footballer, I'm guessing it's the worst thing in terms of your job that can happen in a way, apart from injuries, presumably, and not playing. But, relegation is, for a football club, it means a lot, doesn't it? Not only in terms of a lower league, but people's jobs, things like that.
That's right. It isn't until you get more experienced in life where you realise the extent of getting relegated, what it means, and administration. It's not just you losing your money, because if you've got a relegation clause in your contract where your wages go down, but it's the staff around the football club as well that, as players, you don't really realise. Those tea ladies or the kit man or whoever it is are the ones that could miss out. So, like I said, but when you're young, these things don't come into your mind at all. But as you get older, it's just a difficult time. You get relegated, and we were expected to be up and challenging that first year back, and we didn't. I think we just saved ourselves from being relegated, I believe. But the game or 2 games left of the season, I remember being at the training ground, and Andy Keane had champagne out for celebrating not getting relegated. It was a bit strange, but it's the first time I'd seen that part of football. But yeah, again, that season wasn't really great. There was too many, obviously, managerial changes that we had. Lots of personnel. We signed lots of players that year. I remember that pre-season. There was lots of players turned up for pre-season, and to me, I don't believe players that were good enough for Swindon Town.
You mentioned the previous season. Now, a win over Peterborough, a club that obviously you've mentioned before. Danny Invincible's winner late on in that game.
Yep.
And that basically kept Swindon up only because Bristol Rovers failed to win their last 2 games of the season. So,
but didn't Bristol Rovers have like 8 games to play in like 3 weeks? I think they had to play, and their pitch is awful. The men, wasn't it? So I think that saved us. If I'm being brutally honest, they had lots of games in hand. We had the points on the board, but remember, I think it was a Tuesday night they got beat, and we were safe. But Danny's goal at Peterborough was a fantastic finish, and I still speak to Danny a lot still. So that was one of his better goals for sure. Yeah,
because he had a great career in Scotland, doesn't he? Didn't he? I think Kilmarnock he went on to.
Yeah, he did really well. Yeah, done really well.
Yeah. So what was that moment like? Because for us fans, that goal going in against Peterborough was it in the last couple of minutes, if I remember rightly. How was that for the players?
Like I mentioned, winning games, winning titles is great, and the euphoria. But when you're safe as well, that relief. More so when you're a manager, having been there myself in that relegation battle as a manager. Even as a player, you just sense the relief from the fans, and the goal itself was fantastic volley, wasn't it? Especially against one of my old teams as well, which was even better. But unfortunately, I think I was sat in the dugout at the time. I don't think I come on that day, so my mind was 50-50. I was pleased it was Danny and we stayed up, but also a bit gutted I wasn't on the pitch to celebrate.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but if I remember rightly about that Rovers game on the Tuesday night, there was about 10 minutes of injury time as well, which made it even more agonising, didn't it? When you're sat in front of teletext. Yeah.
Right.
I think there was a lot of. I live in Devon. There was a bit of hollering in the Devon village I live in when that actually went. When that one finished. So, in terms of your other memorable games, of course, there was one against our nearest and not quite so dearest, just up the road, of the A420, which was forever cemented you in Swindon folklore. I talk of the team in yellow, of course. How do you remember that?
I'll be brutally honest. I knew it was the derby. I didn't know the extent of the hatred until when the fixtures were drawn out. When the fixtures come out, you spoke to fans. They knew the date, exactly the date, even back in June, what date it was. I think was it a Sunday kickoff as well. I don't think it was. I think it was a Sunday. I believe, is that right? Was it Sunday?
I think it is. Yeah, because of the police, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was a Sunday. And I remember leading up to it. I'd go out the weekend before, and all it was we got to beat the Skull. We got to beat Oxford. And you felt a bit of pressure, if I'm being brutally honest. You could really sense it. And so the week leading up, it was all the press that you did, the media that you done at the time was all based around the hatred. And then obviously Colin picked the team, and I'm on the bench. And I remember warming up down towards the town end, and all the Oxford fans were there, and we got so much abuse, like you wouldn't believe, so much abuse. And I think it was Reevesy was on the bench with me, and I got the old curly finger from the manager, say, "Come on, you're coming on." And Reevesy went, "Go on, get a winner, Gratz." And I think it was Sol Davis, I think, went down the left and crossed it in. And I think I stooped down to head it. My daughter showed me the goal a few months ago. I've never ever found it, so she found it for me, bless her. And I was, like I said, what a feeling that was. And what a great night out that was after that as well. I went straight out that night.
Did you buy any drinks that night?
I didn't have to that night. No, that was great. That was one of my better nights. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. It's a fabulous feeling because, of course, we haven't beaten them very often, I think it's fair to say. So to actually get a win against them at the county ground is a major achievement, and you clearly felt that.
Oh, without a doubt, the euphoria was astounding. But I remember walking back in the change rooms, and Colin Todd came over to embrace me, and he all he said was, "It had to be you, didn't it?" Like, not like fantastic. It was, you had to. And I thought, you know what? Obviously, he was devastated. It was me who scored the goal. That was not one of his boys, but I didn't care at the time. I was delighted. And maybe that's why I've got the nice rapport with the fans. You know, anyone who scores that goal, a winner against, we won't say their name.
No.
But I remember playing against him in the when Steve Robinson scored a couple as well.
Yeah,
Remember
down
that
at the
game
Manor.
at their
Yeah,
place?
down at the Manor. Yeah.
That as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you might know that Tom during the COVID year, we went there and won when we weren't allowed to go as fans, obviously.
Yeah.
And Tom Broadbent scored an equaliser, and some say got the other one as well. He's gone down in history, that kind of thing. So that you're in there, you're in that bit of folklore. That must be quite special for you.
I loved it. Any sort of big game moment like that is always memorable. And like I said, I think maybe getting all the abuse before the game as well, before the game whilst warming up, made it even better. Because you do take a lot, especially being, you know, the name like I've got. You know, you get called all sorts of names. And we took a lot that day, and just to do that in front of the town end and all was even better.
Amazing. How did you get on with various managers? Because there was a lot of managerial change, which is always difficult for players as well, isn't it? Because, you know, you're doing this one minute and then they've a different way of doing things and all that kind of stuff. How did you get on with your various managers?
Obviously Jimmy. Jimmy went back a long way, but even that was strange because I'd turn up at the ground and Jimmy would make a beeline for me, you know, because he knew me, whereas the other players didn't really like him. It was really strange, the dynamic. And that's football. It's all about opinions. And if you're not in favour, if you're not golden boy, you fall out with managers. It's quite easily done. Colin coming, and he was fine towards the end of that championship season. You know, I'd scored goals. I scored 2 at Sheffield United. But then coming back pre-season, I knew the whole dynamic sort of changed towards me. You know, from saying hello in the corridor to all of a sudden it was just like walking past. And then you pay 250 grand for Gary Alexander and a few other players, and you sort of knew the writing was on the wall. I wasn't his boy, but his assistant Andy King and Malcolm Crosby were great, and Andy was always in my ear saying, "Gratz, you should be playing. I would play you. I would play you. The best. You're the only natural finisher we got at the club." And then Colin went to Derby, didn't he? He got the move to Derby, and Kingy got to become manager. I thought, great, thank God, I'm going to play now. And he never played me. So, but you know what? I loved Kingy. You know, God rest his soul. He was he was great with a lot of players, which I've heard on various podcasts how he treated some, and it wasn't nice to see. But I can honestly say, to me, he was always a gentleman. You had to be in Kingy's clan, shall we say, his clique. You know, if he wasn't, you know, he made it difficult for you. He liked his boys, but he was great. And then Kingy left, and Crosby took over for a game. Now Crosby was a great guy. And then we had Roy.
Yeah. It's a strange time, wasn't it? Because all of a sudden Roy Evans ships up and you're thinking, Roy Evans at Swindon? Not part of the boot room? What's going on? It is all very odd.
It was amazing. You know, Roy, Razor, you know, Razor lived above me in the penthouse when I lived in Swindon. Probably the greatest time I had at Swindon Town. The football was great, but the team spirit was the best I've had in the change rooms. Just Roy's coaching was great. Razor's, you know, team spirit, camaraderie, you know, the whole team were together. And we were doing okay under Roy, to be fair. You know, he didn't get the money that he was expected probably, but his coaching was great. He's such a lovely man, a real gentleman. I really enjoyed the training that we had. And again, but he didn't last very long. You know, that morning he come in to say he's leaving. We were all devastated. And then obviously Kingy come back. And you sort of knew the writing was on the wall then. You know, you just, as a player, you know that you're in or you're not. And that was it. That was my time up at Swindon.
Yeah, memorable goal, a memorable game at Reading, of course, at the Medeski. I think it's the last time we played there. Yeah, and 1-3-1, if I remember rightly.
That's right.
Good.
Alan Pardew was the manager for Reading at the time.
Yeah. I said to you beforehand, I've got that blue shirt up behind me, which of course is the one you made your debut in. Not the shirt, clearly, but that style. I mean, how were they? Because it's very silky, and I imagine on a hot day, it's kind of very silky.
My memory of that shirt was Crystal Palace away. That shirt, that's what I remember. listen, they're a lot bigger. The shirts are a lot bigger than they are now. I've still got some in frames, and my kids can't believe how big they are. But kits are kits. We need 2 of each. It's not like nowadays you get rid of your kits and get another one. If it was, don't give your shirt away. We need it for the sponsors, or we need it for next week. But yeah, that blue kit, I've still got both my my red and blue kits at home.
Of course, if they do give a shirt to the people hold cardboard signs up, they have to pay for them, don't they? The players have to pay.
Yeah, the players do. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you know your time at Swindon was up, and how did it happen?
Listen, when you're not playing week in, week out. I got called into Kingy's office, and this is quite interesting. He just said, "Listen, Gratz, I'm not going to offer a new contract. There's a young player coming through the youth team and into the first team that is a lot cheaper than you. Similar player. It was Alan Young at the time, and which really strange. He used to clean my boots for me when I was at Swindon, and then some 20 years later, I was cleaning his boots. He got me my first job into society. So and we've been close friends ever since. He's probably the tightest player. Myself, Reevesy, and Dan Invincible, Dukesy maybe. But Alan Young, I've known for a hell of a long time, and he rang me today. We're in constant dialogue, and that's the reason why I never got signed up. And in a way, I was devastated because I lived in the area. I just met my future wife, but then fortunately I got the move to Bristol Rovers, which was literally only an hour down the road, so I could still stay in the area.
Yeah, you were saying earlier how you've got a massive connection to Swindon and still have. So the club plays a big part in your life still, doesn't it?
Like I said, I married a Swindon girl. So the in-laws and my nephews, football mad, Swindon mad. My father-in-law and my nephew Sonny, they go season ticket holders. They go week in, week out. I get half-time updates. I get full-time updates every time because if I'm at a different game. So yeah, it's nice. And I took my kids there. I went to the Mansfield game this year towards the end of the season. It's just nice. And what I really like about the club, when I go back to my old clubs, there's no one left of the staff who work doing the programs or on the front desk or any stewards. I come back to Swindon and it's still the same people. And that's what's really nice about it. And for some reason, they still remember who you are. And, I get the cuddle from the program lady outside the main reception. I've known her for years. I love going back. I just, unfortunately, because all my children play football themselves on a Saturday now, finding time to actually go to the games has been proven difficult. But luckily, their game got cancelled and we went down for the weekend and we went and saw, unfortunately, a defeat against Mansfield Town that day.
Yeah. Malcolm says, I remember Razor scoring against Colchester, 1-0 win with an amazing free kick, celebrating with his belly out in front of the Don Rogers tent. I remember that. It was a heck of a crack, wasn't it? I mean, it was 25, 30 yards.
He could strike a ball. He could strike a ball. He was, I know he was big, but he could play. In training, he could strike a football. He really could. And that goal against Colchester was a bit special, wasn't it? It was.
Really absolute belter. Yeah. So your time at Swindon is up. What happens next? Bristol Rovers, just down the road.
Yeah.
But even so, you'll still fondly remember my Swindon fans. So when that opportunity came up, I guess if you're going to move, you want to move to a club where you're living close by, don't you?
Exactly. Like I said, I just bought a place in Swindon, just met my future wife. I had other offers that I could have gone further up north around the country. It was either going to be back home to London, but when Bristol Rovers come in, a big club, Bristol Rovers, and they had a new manager. And the manager who signed me at Peterborough from non-league football, John Still, was the assistant.
Right.
So I thought, which was great. And Ray was difficult. We had to be clean shaven and shirt and tie for training. A real disciplinarian. Army training. And I signed a 2-year deal. But after the first year, I'd hated football. I was ready to quit the game. Did enjoy it. Lots of politics. It seems to be me all the time. But I was one of those players where if I didn't score, what did I do? So I'm one of the words he said to me, Gratz, you do nothing but score goals. That's me as a player. I'm no different. I don't run. Wasn't a runner. Didn't head the ball, but I was a goal scorer. And that's what it was. And some managers like that, and some don't. Ray Graydon wasn't enough. And even though I finished top goal scorer that year at Bristol Rovers, The time come, and I was on holiday. I was ready to quit football, on around the pool with the wife, and I got a phone call from Martin Allen at Barnet to say, "Gratz, Bristol Rovers want Junior Gogo. I want you. We want to do a swap deal. Do you want to come?" And I went, "Yep, straight away. I want to go home back to London." I needed it. I think it was the start of my depression, hating football, not wanting to be around the game no more. And this is the sport I've loved since I was a child. But I was ready to jack it in.
It's interesting you mention that, because mental health, of course, is now being talked about quite a lot. But as a footballer, we all assume that everybody's loving it all the time, but it's a tough gig, isn't it? You've got to be in that team every week. You've got to perform to your best. And if you're not, that must affect you deeply.
It's the best industry and it's the worst industry. I didn't have a career where it was just a nice plateau. My career was either the highs or the lows, injuries, scoring a winner, scoring 5. I had really big highs. My highs were big. And so you've got the euphoria of, and someone always says, don't pop the champagne when things are good. Don't pop the pills when things are bad. But it's so hard when you're in that environment. But you take it home. You can't help it. You want to play every week, and the manager can only play 11. And you got to perform week in, week out. So it's difficult. It was tough. It's a tough gig. There's so many kids that want to be footballers. And yes, the lifestyle was great if you get there. But we only hear of the good ones. I believe there's no pathways for those that get released. I don't think there's enough help. I don't think the PFA do enough. I got no help from the PFA when I struggled at all. They don't do enough for these players who get released. There's no pathway for them to go into society. They've been sold a dream by agents, by clubs, by family members. The peers put pressure on them. And at those levels, you haven't got the money behind you to quit football and look for other ventures and start new things. In the Premier League, you get released. You've got lots of money behind you. The pressure isn't there. But when you're League One, League Two, Conference, and you're getting released, you got to find a job quickly. And it's been tough. It is really tough. And I don't think there's enough honesty out there from players. There's still too many hiding. It's nice to hear more of it coming out in the media now, where people are. But I still think there's plenty more that are struggling in silence. I really do. I'm a firm believer. I'd love to help more people with it. I've got lots of friends who help, but there needs to be more of a pathway and assistance from the bigger members of the PFA.
Is that because it's such a tough male environment, and blokes generally don't talk about their feelings, do they? And we're very good at sort of hiding how we feel and all that kind of thing. What needs to change then? What needs to change in that environment? People in the dressing room, the management. How does it? What needs to change?
Listen, I've not been in a change room environment for many years, but I do a lot of work with the football agency side of it now. So I mentor lots of players, so I hear a lot of it, and it's discussed more now. That's one thing I am hearing. There's lots of opportunities out there for people to come out and speak. But like you say, it's football. It's not a done thing to do, is it? It's this manly sport that crying or in pain mentally is deemed as failure. But what's nice now is more and more players are coming out and mentioning it. It's giving people the opportunity to come out and say, I agree, I'm going through the same thing. We just need more of it and more opportunities for more people to go to and speak about it.
Sure, absolutely right. Lee says, thanks, Gratz. Great player and fab to watch. Well done for your time at Swindon. And there's a red and white emoji following that. So there you go. More praise for you. Barnet played a big part in your life, didn't they? I mean, my goodness, that's one of your major clubs, Barnet, isn't it?
Again, it was the time when I hated football, so I'd come back home. Was it the relief of being home again, back with like mum and dad, sister, etc.? And obviously, I was happy being home, but obviously, I just met my wife to be, so I had to take her away from Swindon into London. And yes, I was happy. When you're happy and you're content outside of football, your football just seems to work. And I can honestly say that was the happiest. Obviously, I've been playing, helped scoring week in, week out, and scoring goals and winning the league, etc. But a nice time, and I do think that was just because I was home. And unfortunately, players don't get that opportunity to, they're either playing 200-300 miles away and moving family and children at different schools. But I was ready. I come to the time of my career, I was 28, 29, to come back home into London was exactly what I needed to get the love back for the game. And I was fortunate that I continued for another 4 or 5 years after that. When really, a year early, I was ready to quit and not play again.
How's Martin Mad Dog Allen then, really?
Yeah, great. You know what? One of the best managers I've worked for. He made me feel so good. I went on that pitch every week knowing, and he just filled me with so much optimism, so much belief that I was the best player. I was going to score today. I'd just went out full of, I don't know, just freedom. And it worked. He was amazing. He did that with lots of players, lots of players in that team. He was a very good manager. I became his assistant for a while, and I could really see how he worked and how he got that belief into players. It's a shame he's not in the game now because he's got this mad dog. Obviously, everyone calls him Mad Dog, but he's a very, very astute, clever man, tactically very good. Like I said, he should still be in the game managing because what I learned from him and what I saw and what he done to me as a player, more and more players should have managers like that because you don't want to play for a man who did that. Yes, he was crazy at times. Some of his antics you couldn't believe, and some you probably couldn't even mention on this podcast. But it worked. He was just very good at what he done. It was for me.
He was a bit like Darren Ferguson at Peterborough, wasn't he? I mean, I don't know how many spells he had at Barnet. It was quite a few,
wasn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. But you were assistant, and actually, you helped keep Barnet up, didn't you? I mean, tell us about that season because you did manage to avoid relegation, and Lincoln went down, I think, that year.
That's right. I was at the time. I was working in the community, like you do for the football club, going into schools and doing soccer schools, soccer camps, etc. And I remember it was the 24th of March. I woke up at 7 o'clock and I had like 6 missed calls on my phone, and it was Martin Allen. I thought, what's he want? And he rang straight. I looked at it and he rang straight away. And, Gratz, what are you doing? I said, just got up, going to work. I need you at the Hive, the Barnet training ground. Can you be in about an hour? Yeah, what's the matter? He said, I want you to be my assistant. I've got the job. I want you to be my assistant. I went, but have you told my boss? I've got, don't worry about that. I'll sort it out. And that was it. I become assistant. And then he took the team for about 3 games. And then he rang me one Sunday night to say, Gratz, Notts County have come in for me. I'm going to Notts County. He said, there's 2 things you can do. You can come with me, or I think you should stay here and steady the ship and see us through. You know what you're doing. And that's what I did. They brought in Laurie Sanchez as a football consultant. And that was just an amazing time. That was probably the best moment in my football career. And it wasn't obviously playing, but you take, as a manager and coach, you take on all that pressure. There's some players that after a game, they just switch off. They don't really care after defeat. But as a manager, you take it home. And so from being sort of the player who got them promoted into the Football League, I could be the manager that brought them down, even though I was only there for 5-6 games. But that final game against Port Vale was just an amazing time, and hearing the crowd roar when we were getting results from Lincoln Aldershot on the mobiles, knowing that they were getting beat. That was just an amazing time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought that was going to be my pathway. I enjoyed the coaching. I enjoyed being a mentor. And then that summer, the chairman of Barnet said, listen, Gratz, I don't want you to be manager. I want you to be assistant. I want you to learn from somebody. So he made Laurie manager and me assistant. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And then he got rid of Laurie. And he pulled me to one. So I said, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with you yet. And I went, I didn't pick Laurie to be the manager. You did. I wanted to be and I thought, you know what, if I was going to be treated like that by a club that I'd done so well at, you know what, football's not for me. So I was young enough to start a new career path, and like I said, I was thankful to Alan Young, who gave me an opportunity in the real world, shall we say, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I mean, do you regret not still being in football, or?
Yeah,
you
do. It's the best. Like I said, it's the best industry to be in. How can you not want to be playing football on the field, whether you're a player or whether you're a coach? It's what you did as a kid. I really enjoyed the camaraderie in the change rooms. You just don't get that in life, what you got as a footballer. The euphoria before kickoff in the tunnel, that buzz. nothing has replaced that. It really doesn't. It's a really hard thing to say, and unless you've experienced it, you don't really know. And it's tough. And finishing was really hard, really hard.
And so, therefore, you going back to the mental health side of it, you can understand why former players, former cricketers, people like that, who really do struggle to find something in their life which can come anywhere close to that.
And it doesn't, and nothing can come near it. And I never played at the top, but I enjoyed being I enjoyed what I'd done. Every day I treat the training like it was my job. I worked hard in training, and that's when you see some of these youngsters who don't, they just, yeah, I'll be all right. The career can be really short, and it ends really quickly. Nothing replaces it. It really can't. The buzz, but even if you're not playing, just being around the lads, and it's difficult to say, but I found it really difficult, really tough time.
Yeah, I would imagine that moment against that team in yellow, those of us of a Swindon persuasion, that's a moment we would love, treasure, keep forever. And I guess you do too, because you can't replicate that, can you? That moment in front of the town end, you can't replicate it.
You can't. And my wife has a go at me all the time, or my kids, because I watch my goals all the time. I show my children how to do it. But I love the buzz. I get the buzz from watching it back because I can remember them all. I remember all my goals, the moments. And they're playing football. And there's times when they don't want to go and train or don't want to play. And I say, seriously, whilst you can, you've got to play. You've got to do it and enjoy it. You do it for fun, not because you want to be the best player in the country, or do it because you love doing it, enjoy it. And I did. I enjoyed it. The only time I didn't enjoy it when I was at Bristol Rovers. That's when I did not enjoy football at all. It's my only time in my career. Even under Colin Todd, I didn't play. I still loved going into training. Great times.
Fabulous. Well, Emma says, do you keep in touch with any of your old Swindon teammates? Well, you've already indicated, I think you do. Danny Invincible, Alan Young, people like that. And I guess that's another thing. That comradeship carries on, doesn't it?
You know what? You're with your teammates more than you are your family. Every day, the weekends, overnight stays for away games. So you know them really well. They know everything about you. And so I can honestly say, in all the clubs I've been at, there's only a real few that who are really tight as friends. The rest were just teammates that you could pick up the phone, have a chat, fine. But there's only a real few that you really you could spend a lot more time with. Like I said, Reevesy was great for me, Alan Reeves. He was so good to me when I first joined. And even now, we talk. Danny Invincible was similar to me, Italian boy, obviously Australian, but Italian heritage. Dukesy, Alan Young. I saw Matt Hewlett the other day. There's a few of the boys that you still see, and we had great times at Swindon. Great times. What we went through with not being paid, and some of the managers we had, some of the chairmans we had. So when you meet each other, that's what you talk about. They were fun times. They really were.
Yeah, David Duke played in a charity game at the County Ground last week. So
I got invited. Yeah, I got invited. Unfortunately, I slipped a disc 4 weeks ago, so I couldn't. But yeah, Dukesy was messaging me to say, please come down and play. He looked good fun. He looked really good.
Yeah, it would have been good to have had you down there. Well, comments are coming in again. This is from Jonathan. Refreshing listening to Gratz. Openness about his experience within football. Been a great interview tonight, guys. Thank you very much indeed for that. Ian says, can you ask Gratz if he ever played at Darlington? Did you ever play at Darlington? Did it at Feetham's or the new ground? Both grounds.
Grounds. Yeah, both grounds. The new ground I played must be about 800 people in it. It was the biggest ground with no people in it.
Yeah.
But the old ground was good. I remember I played there. Yeah, long way up though. Long way up. That was
Feetham's by the cricket ground as well, wasn't it?
Right.
Caroline says, loved him. Named my cat after him. There you go.
Thanks.
Craig says, thanks, Gratz. On the last game of the 01-02 season, you stopped and posed for a photo with my two sons outside the ground. All three of you in that classic Zara tracksuit. Zara one. Yeah. We'll always remember that goal against them, Vic. Thanks so much for your service at Swindon. You were great, Gratz. You see, all positive comments.
Thank you. It's nice words. Thank you.
Very nice. Some players play for 10, 15 years and never get comments like that. So you kind of... I mean, many people will want to know what people do when they do finish with football. Now, you say you went into the real world. So what happened?
So, like I said, I went into coaching to start with, and it just wasn't for me. So but I was getting a lot of young players asking me for advice on clubs and what to do next. So I went to the agency game as a sideline just to see if I liked it. But I went into conveyancing, so into financial services. And I've been there ever since. I'm now sales director of a big firm in Landmark Information Group. So I do that, and the football's my sideline. I go to games at the weekend. I go to games on a Tuesday night, Wednesday night. I don't drink, don't smoke. Football is my addiction. So unfortunately, I've got a caring wife who understands that I need that fix. My kids play, so my weekends are filled with watching the children play, and I just love going watching football. I like watching non-league. I think there's some real good stars that you can pick out in non-league football. I think there's a lot of better players in non-league football than there is in the football leagues. Some Saturdays that I watch, so I enjoy that. I'll enjoy spotting players and bringing them through and nurturing them. I got Jared Bowen from Hereford and took him right through. So I enjoy that pathway. It's a pathway I was fortunate enough to go through from non-league, and it can happen. There's so many that do come through now. So that's sort of the area and sort of the clubs I go to look at.
Ian says, thanks. Feetham's ground is now a soulless housing estate, which is a shame, really, because, old football grounds.
Old stadiums.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Because so many memories are wrapped up in those. Yeah. Whoever you support, it's your ground, isn't it?
That's right.
Because, Barnet has now got the new ground.
School. It's a school now. I drive past it all the time. The old Barnet Underhill is a school. And it's, it's a big shame.
Because you were mentioning earlier about how when you were in the dugout for Barnet, a certain Paolo Di Canio was in the opposite dugout 4 times in one season. I mean, obviously, those 2 years were kind of ingrained in Swindon fans' memories now as incredible years. What was it like being in the opposite dugout to him?
Di Canio was obviously, for me, again, Italian, but he was a great player anyway, played for West Ham. And I remember playing against him in a pre-season friendly, actually, against Swindon. At the county ground, they come down one summer. I think Lampard played, Rio, but Di Canio played, and he just had this aura about him. He just had this, I don't know, like a Roman god. And as a manager, he was exactly the same. And I remember, 4 times we played each other that year, and I remember the fitness levels of that team and the application of every player. The hard work they put in. He demanded that hard work. He demanded, greatness, and you do this, do that. And they were really fit side. And what was nice is a lot of the players weren't from bigger clubs that had come down. He worked hard. I think Matt Ritchie was in that team at the time, and Connell up front. A real good, hard-working team. And it's a shame he'd left. I'd love to have seen him back at the county ground. Whether that'll happen one day soon, I probably don't think so. Some say he may have ruined the club financially. Some of the wages being paid were high at the time. Obviously, we knew what the budgets were. But he delivered. That team was strong and powerful. His coach Fabrizio as well. Was really, really nice. Maybe the fact you beat us 3 times out of 4, that they were nice to us. But yeah, it's great just sharing a dugout.
Did he hit the plexiglass a lot? Because his famous trick at the Swindon
he did.
He hit the glass on the dugout quite a lot, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And we used to take a sweep.
One of my memories was it Northampton away? I went to watch running down.
Yeah.
I think one of the last-minute winners. I remember that. I was at that game, doing some scouting, and I remember that. But that's what you want as a man. Did you want to see that as a fan and a player? Your manager's got that passion, the will to win, and wants to win. I'd rather see that than someone standing there doing nothing and just pointing a finger. Me personally, maybe that's why I like Martin Allen. Martin was all, the passion and the will. We need to win and work hard. That's what we're here to do. So
we used to take a sweepstake as to when he would hit the plexiglass at the county ground. It was like, would it be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or because he would inevitably do that. And he turned around. I don't know if he did this when you were coaching, but he turned around to the people in the dugout and talked to them. And
in Italian.
Was it in Italian? Was it?
Probably. Yeah. His English wasn't great.
No. Well, Gratz, thank you so much for tonight.
No problem at all. Absolute pleasure.
Remember going to Salisbury with you when Edgar Davids was manager at Barnet, and the love that the Barnet supporters had for you. So it seemed to be a general consensus that wherever you've gone. Oh gosh, more coming in now. Mervyn says, great having you on here. John says, would Gratz ever consider scouting for Swindon, especially if he's unearthing quality players from the non-leagues? Do you ever get phone calls from clubs like Swindon or not?
No, I haven't. Obviously, depends on what managers are going in and what scouting net, but they've got. I've given players to Swindon before and offered players before. Flynn's a good manager. He's got a good network around him. I expect a good season next year. I know he didn't do overly well at Walsall, but this seems to be a nice fit. I think he done really well at Newport. And knowing the sort of players that he's gone after in the past, he knows the levels. So fingers crossed. I need a happy father-in-law and nephew. I can't afford those phone calls at the half-time and full-time anymore moaning.
Yeah, there was a lot of moaning this season. Trust me.
There was. Yeah.
Yeah. Met Gratz when he came to watch the town in the stand and told about my cat, the one he named after you. Love you, Gratz. You were the best, nice bloke, top bloke. Ian says, and the county ground in the early 90s, it's 4-0 in the old League Cup game. I got home at 4:30 a.m. Wowzers. That was after Swindon lost 3-0 up at Darlington, if I remember rightly, in the League Cup. Absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Chris.
It's been great talking to you. And as I said, a player who spent so little time at the ground in respect of your career, to have got so many nice comments. I hope that's got home to you tonight.
It's really nice. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thank you to the fans that have listened. So, and thank you for the invite, both of you.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Indeed. Thank you.
Right, everybody. We will be back next week. We have got the special guest is Mark Shortoff. So I'm sure he can give us some stories about his dad as well. So same time, same place next Monday, and we will see you then. Thank you very much.